everyone. Maggie, I'm going to kick it off to you to get us started with our impact investing series.
Awesome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy 2022. It's lovely to see your faces, some of you. And for those whose faces I'm not seeing, the familiar names, we're delighted to have you to the first of 4 of our impact series. So just very briefly, this is the way we've structured this series, which you may have read about, is we're starting with what I perceive to be, or what we perceive to be, sort of the simplest types of impact investing onto the more complex areas. So we'll have 4 sessions whose complexity will get a little bit more as we go along. We're aware that we've got people on the call and in our organization that are at various levels and various stages of this journey. So I just want to emphasize that as we go along, if you have questions or comments, there are no dumb questions. And we encourage you to ask. We'll have an opportunity for interaction here in every one of these sessions. So today we're starting with how you might invest your cash for impact. And we're delighted to have with us some folks from CNote. For those of you who are not familiar with CNote, CNote is an award-winning, first of its kind financial platform that allows anyone to make money investing in causes and communities they care about. With the mission of closing the wealth gap, CNote directs every dollar invested toward funding female and minority-led small businesses, affordable housing, and economic development through its nationwide network of CDFI community lenders. Today, we're very fortunate to have Kat Berman and Danielle Burns with us. Kat is the CEO and co-founder of CNote, and has helped, and she wants us to emphasize, she'll talk more about this, CNote engages with large institutions, corporations, banks, foundations, as well as individual investors to invest, to address racial justice, climate change, and other pressing social issues through investments of cash. She's a 3-time entrepreneur with experience building scalable businesses. Prior to CNote, she worked as a managing director at Charles Schwab. She's worked at Vanguard. She's spoken at events hosted by Stanford, Oxford, Google, The Economist, SOCAP, Coinbase, which I particularly found interesting. And Danielle is an MBA AIF. She is the vice president, head of business development for CNote. Prior to joining, Danielle worked for First Affirmative Financial Network in a variety of business development roles from 2004 to 2019, most recently serving as vice president of sales and marketing, where she worked with a highly collaborative team that was responsible for the growth and profitability of the firm's distribution channels. Her own background emphasizes business strategy and consulting, executing integrated campaigns, marketing, communication, etc. So these are, we're just thrilled to have you both here today. And with that, I will let you take it away.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to Maggie. Thank you so much to WGN for hosting us today. We are thrilled to be here. As Maggie shared, my name is Kat Berman. I am co-founder and CEO of CNote. We're going to pull up our presentation, and both Danielle and I are going to tag team, and really excited for your questions. As Maggie shared, we are very conscious that for some of you, this is going to be perhaps information you know, and for many, it'll be the first time. And so excited to share what we're about. Most importantly, talk about the opportunities around using cash as a very intentional way to invest with your values. So next slide. So what is CNote? We are a women-led, women-owned, women-led fintech platform. As Maggie shared, my background is in finance. So I was in both financial services and venture capital prior to CNote. My colleague and co-founder led a $10 billion risk management function. So we both had kind of our footings in finance, and the genesis of CNote was really around recognizing that while we loved finance, we really wanted to see it as a tool for change. How do we create more economic opportunity and fund the causes and communities we care about through not just our philanthropic efforts, which were important, but also through our investment? We really saw our investment portfolios as a tool that we were underutilizing in terms of expressing our values. We were founded in 2016. If you want to go back one, founded in 2016. And I will share that, you want to go back a little bit. She's going all the way. And just a little bit more about us. Obviously, we have an incredible team with decades of community finance expertise. We'll talk a little bit more about the type of community finance institutions we're involved with. And on this road, since 2016, we've had 0 losses. So we've mobilized over $100 million into underserved communities with absolutely 0 losses and 0 defaults. And those are just a few of our partners and accolades. Next slide. So more specifically, what do we do? One of the things we recognized early in our journey of CNote, in this desire to use in our investment portfolios as a tool for change, was that community finance and impact investing was largely a very manual process. And so what we like to use is the power of technology to really make this much more efficient and scalable for our investors and for the communities we serve, and a community first system. And happy to talk more about that. But that's really centered around how do we really understand and represent the true desires of the community, not just what we think they need. So the assumption here is that for years, the power dynamic has rested in those, at the boardroom saying what they think is going to drive community prosperity. And how do we flip that dynamic and really make sure that we're putting dollars to work in a way that is truly driving sustainable change? Our efforts really help our investors find, diligence, and deploy dollars. So many of our investors that come to us in CNote say, I care about the environment, or I care about racial justice, or I care about my own backyard, my community. How do I invest in that? And it can be very challenging to find those great investment opportunities that meet both your values, but also your performance targets for your portfolio. So that's really our strength is, finding, diligencing, and helping you deploy, move that money and get it to work for you. We have a nationwide network. So we are a nationwide organization. We've got our feet on the ground, moving dollars across the country. And our platform really supports a lot of causes that are near and dear to many investors, including supporting BIPOC entrepreneurs of color, building affordable housing, providing first-time mortgages for low-income families, and driving economic inclusion across the United States. Next slide. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Danielle Burns, to take us through CDFIs, my mission-driven deposit institutions, which is what MDDI stands for, and why we think that's such an important area for investors to explore and invest in. Danielle?
Thanks so much, Kat, and thank you, Maggie and WDN for having me and CNote here today. I'm really excited about the opportunity. So, why invest in CDFIs, community development financial institutions, or mission-driven depository institutions that scale? For a long time, I think many investors have thought about, you want to invest in a way that's meaningful, it's going to have impact. Measurable impact, but the how part of it was a bit of a struggle. And were you sure that this was something that was going to work? It's not an asset class that has been widely talked about within the financial services industry. I've been in impact investing for a very long time, but if I'm being fully transparent, I've learned a lot since I've been on the team here at CNote in terms of the impact that CDFIs make and that they have with our local communities. And so one of the things that we know is that CDFIs and MDDI investments, they provide really solid financial returns. If you think about some of the larger banking institutions, your UBS or Merrill Lynch or have you, these CDFI and MD mission-driven depository institutions, they are on track or outperform, quite frankly, some of their counterparts in terms of their charge-off rates, and they have very historic low rates in terms of defaults and things like that. Part of that is specifically because these institutions are very committed and focused to the success, the success of the folks that they lend capital to. Having these borrowers be successful, have businesses that thrive, communities that thrive is a paramount of what they stand for. And so as a result of that, they have very low charge-off and loss rates. They are nonprofit lenders with the focus on capital preservation. What does that mean? They are very focused on doing good work in the communities that they serve. They want to ensure that when you invest in organizations like theirs, you're going to be able to do well and do good and not have loss of your money, which is a concern, right? Because CDFIs are not a asset class that many of us are traditionally know about. It's sometimes difficult to know, okay, well, if I invest my money here, am I going to lose my money here? And so they are specifically focused on being a capital preservation provider. And they have mandates specifically to help increase the capital to underserved communities. For CDFIs, that is their mandate. They are federally required, right, to specifically support low to moderate income communities, BIPOC communities, communities of color, so that those communities can thrive and grow and be successful. I'm not sure what's, some of the common myths within community investing is that if you do this type of investing, there's a trade-off. I think there's, maybe along, years ago, perhaps, but certainly not today. There's, no shortage of impact stories, of what is happening on the ground with these community investments, how these investments are changing the lives of the individuals, and that you don't have to necessarily give up return in order to have impact. Community investments are typically the economic first responders. They are the ones who are showing up in times of need. The past 2 years have been case in point of that, full stop. Our CDFI partners are the ones who are really supporting these small businesses throughout, when PPP is running out and all these, the other government funding is running out, our community partners are really showing up to be that backbone and support of the communities that they serve. Community investing is too risky is often a myth. For community investing, particularly on the minority mission-driven depository side, that is investing in fully insured FDIC, NCUA, National Credit Union Administration institutions. So that's where that capital preservation piece comes in. And so that is, really reducing the risk of loss because it is a fully insured investment there. And in terms of it's hard to measure impact, I think that's one of the things that we're seeing just kind of broadly is that, how do I know that my money is really, doing the work that it's intended to do? And I think, being able to share real tangible stories of impact is where that helps to bust that myth. Being able to talk with the borrower and say, I received, a loan, a small business loan from an institution, and here's how it changed my life. Here's how it changed my family's life. Here's how I was able to support my community. So being able to really double down on those stories of how their lives have changed, and share those stories broadly, right, across, with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and have the data to back that up is one thing that's really, key in this work. And for CNote, that's a key part of our work. We have beautiful, beautiful borrower stories that really highlight exactly how and where the dollars are going to work in the community. Next, I want to just quickly talk about CNote's core product suite. we have four sort of main solutions that an investor can look to partner with CNote on. We have our flagship fund, our wisdom fund, our impact cash, and a custom note. And I'll touch on each of them, very briefly. Our flagship fund is a short duration note. It is a 30-month note. It is available to both accredited and non-accredited investors. Flagship Fund is our longest product offering. CNote is almost 6 years old. And this was our legacy product offering. And CNote, when we were started, was an opportunity to really democratize investing and make investing to anyone who wanted to invest in community the ability to do so. And so our flagship fund remains a no minimum portfolio option that's investing in a diversified portfolio of CDFIs throughout the country, focusing things such as affordable housing, gender equity, gender equality, racial equity, climate justice, that sort of thing. Our Wisdom Fund is our fixed income bond, where we're focusing 100% on women of color entrepreneurs. This is available for accredited investors only. And I know you're not supposed to choose, your favorite child, but the Wisdom Fund by far is mine. The work that we're doing within the Wisdom Fund is really an opportunity to create systems level change the narrative on how women of color are being perceived from a credit risk lending perspective. In addition to the Wisdom Fund, as an investment vehicle, we're also doing really, great work in partnership with our CDFI partners to understand what types of products, what are the initiatives, what are the ways we can evaluate how we lend out to women of color? What are the very unique needs that women of color have when they're looking to access capital, and how can we just change the narrative in terms of what's the perception of when a woman of color seeks capital, why or why not does she get the capital? And so the Wisdom Fund is really an opportunity to help create that systems level change that we so desperately need. Our impact cash solution is a cash management solution. Again, we're partnering with mission-driven depository institutions, and you're getting fully insured FDIC that is available for accredited investors only as well. And it's a variable rate of return. And we're partnering with these MDDIs across the country to support, things such as affordable housing, small business lending, et cetera, within the nation. And then our last one is a custom note. This can be really fun, right? Particularly if you have an organization, maybe you're part of a foundation or what have you, and you want to really double down on an impact from a theme as well as a geography perspective. So if you said, I'm really passionate about supporting BIPOC communities in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, or the New York tri-state area, you look to maybe want to create a custom note to do that. And so we can think about and look at, how we can, help align both your thematic goals as well as with your geography goals. That is available for accredited investors only. I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Kat, and she is going to talk about connecting meaning to money. This is one of those beautiful borrower stories that I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah, so we've certainly spent some time today talking to you about where we think there's opportunity to use your cash for good in both fully insured and uninsured ways. And it's a really important piece because there are folks who are new to impact investing that really want to make sure that they're putting their money to work that, in a way that is 100% protected. And so I think our FDIC insured product or cash solution and then our uninsured solutions represent a nice spectrum of initial opportunities. And I'm happy to talk about other opportunities outside of CNote as you think about cash as a tool for change. But we love ending on this slide because at the end of the day, why bother, right? Your cash is sitting somewhere nicely today, right? Probably making some type of yield, likely low in this environment, but still, why bother looking into this? And a story like Cindy's, I think, hopefully highlights that the difference that you can make the transformational opportunity in front of all of us to use our portfolios as a tool for change is very, very real. And so let me give you this one example. So who you're looking at is Cindy Dolphin. So she is a incredible woman and was never an entrepreneur, didn't even consider herself an entrepreneur until she faced a series of bouts with cancer. And in fact, she is a 4-time cancer survivor. She's undergone 9 surgeries in her journey with cancer. And it was in, I believe, her 5th experience where she came up with this idea of a medical drain holder. So for those of you who've gone through surgery, you probably know that oftentimes you are given a medical drain, which looks kind of like a tube with a bulb that's supposed to remove fluid, right? So remove fluid from the area that was operated on. It's very common for surgeries, and cancer patients have that as part of the outpatient or part of the next step treatment once surgery is performed. The issue with most of these medical drains is they are very clunky, very hard to navigate. It's hard to sleep with them. It's hard to shower with them. And oftentimes what a nurse will do is just pin it to your gown and call it a day. Well, for Cindy, she felt that that was just one more way cancer robbed her of her dignity. It was enough to go through this, but to have to now post-treatment, post-surgery, have all of these devices that were wonky all around her, it was just too much. And so she decided she was going to create something that just brought more sense of normalcy and dignity to the cancer survivor and outpatient treatment. So she created a lovely mesh carrier. And this was something that she started prototyping and introducing to different nurses and doctors that she met with to say, something like this, I would feel much better using. And it was essentially almost like a satchel that carried the tube and allowed her to be much more flexible. It could be worn underneath the clothes. It could be worn in the shower. And again, brought that new sense of normalcy to her life after these cancer treatments. So lo and behold, she starts creating these and the nurses and doctors loved them. They introduced them to other cancer patients and she started to sell these medical drain carriers. The issue became capital. As I shared, Cindy was not an entrepreneur. She did not come from a lot of money. And so how you grow a business coming from no background, no capital was her challenge. She went to a CNote community development partner and got her first loan to actually grow and develop her business, which is now called Kulyk Medical Carriers. Aside from that capital and that loan, she also got free technical assistance. So she really got this unbelievable opportunity to realize her dream of creating these carriers at scale in a very fair and affordable way that wasn't a huge burden on her. Fast forward, she continued to make these, sell these, and is now growing into wonderful nationwide distribution. But what I love about this story as well is not just the beautiful device that she's created for cancer patients, but the how. And this to me is just one more signal. And I don't have to emphasize this with WDN because you know this very well, the power of investing in women. So not only was Cindy as an entrepreneur creating a device that brought more dignity and more efficiency and use for cancer patients, but the how she did it, she ended up employing or asking women that she had volunteered with for years over in Kilimanjaro. So she had been visiting both on trekking and volunteer efforts in Kilimanjaro years back, and found that there are a group of women at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro who were wonderful weavers. So she decided to ask them if they would weave a sample basket, a sample Kulyk satchel, and see what would look like. Well, it was beautiful. And she ended up starting to bring revenue, employing these women to build, to weave these Kulyk medical drain satchels. And that resulted in 2 things. Number one is the women did such a great job at doing this that they ended up finding that there were other uses in Kilimanjaro for that. And so they ended up selling these satchels to other folks locally. And then of course also got revenue from Cindy and the Kulyk company for that. And those women at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro used that revenue of this small business that just had, that had been developed to send many of their daughters to school for the very first time. So an incredible story, and certainly one of many, of how women create this unbelievable ripple effect when you give them the power of capital and the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. They don't just benefit themselves, they typically benefit others, their community, and in Cindy's case, thousands of miles away, the women and the girls of Mount Kilimanjaro. I share that because Cindy could not have gotten that capital without an investment in community finance institutions. For those finance institutions to give and support and invest in Cindy, we need to invest in them. And it was because of CNote Capital, it was because of investors like you who move dollars into these different containers that Danielle shared, that an entrepreneur like Cindy gets to realize her dream. So just one example of many we have of why this matters and why exploring using your dollars in a different way can actually be very transformational. So I believe that is our presentation, Maggie. I think our last slide is probably our contact information, which is easy enough to get. So I'll pass it back to you and excited to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Oh, good. And here's the rest of the gang coming back. Excellent. Let me just start by saying, again, thank you. And also just note that in my excitement to introduce Kat and Danielle, I didn't even bother to introduce myself. You all seem so familiar to me. I assumed I was familiar to you, but let me more formally say that my name's Maggie Kulyk. I am your WDN C3 board chair. And part of why I'm really involved in this beyond just my involvement in WDN is that I also have a day job, although increasingly my WDN work seems to be crowding that out. But on the weeks that I'm able to still do my day job, I am the owner and CEO of a wealth management ESG impact-centric investment firm called Chicory Wealth that's based in Atlanta. And I am speaking to you today from Atlanta, Georgia. So as I relay some of these questions and Kat and Danielle and I converse with you, I am coming from that perspective as someone who has, thank you, environmental, social, and governance. Thank you, Tamara. I'm coming from the perspective of someone who works with clients who are very, very committed to using their money in the service of their values. And so that's part of how I got connected to CNote to begin with. So let's start with one of the questions from our chat, which I think will lead us into some more specifics. Why does, for example, the Wisdom Fund offer a significantly lower return, even though the term is double the length of the higher return Flagship Fund? So essentially, is that a risk metric? And can you speak a little bit more to that? Kat?
Yeah, Danielle, if you don't mind, I'll take this one. It's a great question, and I think it highlights a little bit of how we run our business. So I will first start with, it is absolutely not a factor of risk, and I think the good news is we've spent a lot of time at CNote really addressing this myth that women of color are a riskier bet. It's very unfortunate, the huge gap in capital. I mean, unfortunate is the understatement. It is, I would say, atrocious, the gap in capital for women of color that remains today. And so we have spent a long time really working on the data to bust that myth for individuals and institutions that investing in women of color is actually riskier. It's not. And we have a lot of data to support it. So I would encourage you to reach out to us if that's of interest. So the return really reflects twofold. One is the market, and two is the impact. As you probably have seen in the last couple of years, we've really entered a very low yield environment. And so recognizing that from a competitive lens is one piece of it. But the second piece, more importantly, is our desire to produce impact first products. As we thought about the needs, especially going into a global pandemic for women of color, it became very, very clear that those affected by this pandemic, both from a health and economic perspective, that heavy weight disproportionately fell on communities of color. Right. And if you think about who typically takes on the childcare, who takes on the parent care, who takes on all those other externalities of dealing with a global crisis, it's the woman of the house. And so this is very, very true in communities of color. And so we made an internal decision at CNote to create our first impact first product. With not the intention of how do we make it as competitive as possible to other 5-year notes, but truly impact first. For those who raised their hand and said, I get that this is a critical time and that one of the best things we can do is support women of color entrepreneurs, today and tomorrow for the future of our economy, and that they are facing such a heavy burden, particularly now. So it was a very impact-driven decision we made. And like I said, not for everyone, certainly those who are yield first, it's not always their first choice, but those who are impact first, it is our kind of impact forward product.
Thank you. I'm seeing a hand raised. Is that a follow-on, Nancy, to this?
It is. It
Go
is.
ahead.
I'm just a little unclear still between the two. Is what you're saying, the first one, which is the flagship fund, is, this is not the right words, less impact than the wisdom fund? I'm just trying to understand the difference there.
Yeah, different impact. No, it's a great question, Nancy. Different impact. So the flagship fund is a portfolio of CDFIs. So that's us investing in a variety of these community finance institutions. And that's doing a lot of different good, right? That's affordable housing. That's investing in sustainable communities. The wisdom fund is 100% dedicated to women of color. How do we create more wealth for women of color? Full stop.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And can I follow on just on that, just so I'm clear too, Kat? When you say it's 100% invested in women of color, it's still being invested through CDFIs.
Correct.
But you're mandating that this money be used in a particular way. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So you still get the safety, you still get the protection of going through a certified, proven entity, but the result is that entity focuses on and supports women of color. That's right.
Got it. Got it. Good. And Michelle, I'll get to that question in just a second, because that's not in the weeds. That's a really important question. I want to get to that as well, but I want to take Peggy Kerchak's question first. I think you somewhat answered this, but maybe there are parameters. She asked, can an investor in CNote specify a particular location, for example, Pennsylvania, for their investment, and what are the parameters? You indicated a specialty note, certain minimum. Do you want to speak a little more to that?
Sure. Danielle, do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So we do have the ability to do what we call custom notes. And that's for when clients say, you know what, I want to specifically support BIPOC communities or affordable housing in Pennsylvania, for example. And so we do have the ability to do that. What that looks like is, we focus very much on a needs-based matching perspective, right? And so we would say, okay, let's identify who are our CDFI partners within that specific geographic region, who is maybe doing work around affordable housing in that region, and what are their capital needs at any given time. And so taking all of those components, we would then say, okay, here's who we've identified is in that region, here's doing work in that region, and here who is taking capital, and we could look to create a custom note for you based on those parameters. So absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
And I'll also share really quickly, when we do custom notes, we can do geography, theme, or both, as Danielle was alluding to. So you may say, I'd love to do Pennsylvania, right? I'd love to see, right? Just period. I want to invest in Pennsylvania and make sure there's economic opportunity. Or you may say, I want to invest in women in Pennsylvania. Or you may say, I want to invest in communities of color in Philly. So we can get pretty granular in terms of custom and trying to align where you value the most.
So I have two follow-ons to that that I think would be of interest to the group. One is just you speak a lot about your CDFI partners. Any sense of like, how many partners are we, how many organizations are we talking about? You might have put that in a slide and I missed it, but just to give us a sense of the breadth.
Yeah, we have over 1,000 across the country. So a lot, a lot. And then we do periodic diligence of them, right? Because how a CDFI was 6 months ago may not be how they are today. Or for example, it became even more important, our diligence technology. It's really our technology that does it seamlessly. Our technology became even more important in a global pandemic, because you may have relied on a CDFI or a group of CDFIs in 2018. And then suddenly in 2020, you're scratching your head going, how are they doing? And are they operating similarly? As Danielle shared, fortunately, these are incredible institutions that have done very well in the global pandemic, meaning really not only survived, but thrived, right? Really brought in the opportunity to drive more capital into communities most affected without, right, high defaults and high losses. But yes, very large network, which is why we can do the level of customization we're talking about.
Which is also, I mean, I think you just gave the number one reason for your value proposition of why you might use CNote as opposed to going and seeking a direct individual investment in an individual CDFI that you may or may not, right? Essentially what you guys are doing is the due diligence on those institutions. That's,
That's right, Maggie. What we often
use piece too, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, we're such fans of the industry. What we normally say is if you have a CDFI in your backyard that you know, love, and have the ability to diligence, go for it, right? We would never stand in that way, and we think that's fantastic. The reality is most folks do not come with deep community finance expertise. And so they're looking at this balance sheet, trying to assess the risk, and that can be very challenging. And that's not just an individual. Most major banks take anywhere from 6 to 10 months to diligence a CDFI. So the complexity around really trying to understand what you're investing in is real. And that was one of the huge things that we sought to eliminate as a friction point, is we thought if we can't make this easier to understand the risk and actually understand what you're investing in, then we're never going to open up the channels of opportunity for these organizations. So to your point, Maggie, identifying who's there, but really diligencing them, and being able to get those dollars out, and then monitor it, right? Make sure that you're getting, that you have a dashboard. When you work with CNote, you'll see on our platform, you have access at any given time to your investment. So you can see how it's performing. You can get your impact report. You can withdraw as dollars needed. All those kind of goodness is not something you have to do by picking up the phone and trying to get someone at the CDFI. It's all just accessible as you would expect on a dashboard on a platform. So
that, I think, is a good segue into this more particular question that Michelle asked, and I really want to deal with this too, because it boils down to, some of you I know on the call may already be invested in CNote, but how does one do it? Particularly, I think many of you probably work with a financial advisor. Not all of you, but I bet I would venture to guess that a lot of you do. So if you go to your financial advisor and you say, hey, I want to have CNote as part of my portfolio, they will perhaps look at you like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So for example, the question is CNote an RIA or registered investment advisor? Are you custodied somewhere, et cetera, et cetera? I'll let you answer how this works. And so as a consequence, what some of the hurdles are that have to be overcome if you're trying to work through an advisor. And we can talk more about that if people are interested. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are not an RIA. We are a financial platform, and it's a really important point of distinction. So we will never give you financial advice or kind of try to steer you. What we do is have a financial platform that does three things. It identifies, it diligences, and it administers, meaning identify what are the opportunities, right, to put your money to work for good. We've given you a few today, but frankly, we're agnostic. You may want to come to us for a different reason and say, I have a couple notes I'd love to host on your platform. So we do have a platform that does those three things, and products that you can onboard immediately. So that's from the diligence perspective. And then of course the administration is, how do you actually get the dollars, right? How do you get the dollars out the door? We do not work, unfortunately, right now with other platforms like Schwab and Vanguard and Fidelity. We hope to one day. Unfortunately, as many of you have seen, their onboarding of ESG, fixed income and cash has not gotten to the pace where I think a lot of investors would like. So unfortunately, we are not hosted on their platform. We do have a custody partner. Northern Trust is actually our custodial partner. And so particularly those who are interested in impact cash. You have dollars sitting in an FDIC account today and said, oof, I bet you those could go to work somewhere else. Getting still a good return, but also knowing you're putting that money to work in a really positive way, that is very easy for us to do. And that works with our custodial partner.
So let me make sure I understood that. So in other words, if you had money at Northern Trust, this could be easier. But if you've got money sitting, and I know this for a fact, at Fidelity, for example, which is where my registered investment advisory firm custodies our client assets, we can't just press a button and buy our client a CNote product that would be embedded in their portfolio as part of their allocation yet.
Correct.
But we should have a side conversation as to what, if anything, I could do at Fidelity to get that.
Yeah. No, and I'll tell you,
I would like nothing better than to be able to do that, right?
And we
I'm sure others would too.
We get this a lot, which we're so appreciative of. We have quite a wonderful advisory following. And I'll say there's two things. One is obviously anyone who wants to do this can. So if you share with your advisor that I care deeply about women of color and their success, and I want to do the Wisdom Fund, of course, your advisor can always find a way. So we have a platform solution, again, that is very secure. And so even without being hosted on, your platform of choice, we have plenty of clients that work with their advisor to do it. It's just a one more platform, frankly, that your advisor needs to use. Just think about it as one more tool that your advisor is going to onboard. That's really the friction. It's nothing, honestly, it's one more tool that they're going to onboard. So there is a way for sure. And then the second thing is, let your platform know. So if you work with Fidelity or Schwab or whoever you work with, letting them know that you'd like to see CNote platforms is certainly a big part of this. So we do have kind of a growing list of clients who have made the case for CNote, and that's really how you bang down that door, is kind of share that, not from our perspective, but from real investors saying, this is what I want to see, and this is what I would expect from you.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking at some of the other questions that are coming in. Elaine asked, do you share info on your partner organizations before or with investment in your fund? And I think she's saying partner organizations, the specifics of the CDFIs that you might be investing through.
And so, in terms of, absolutely. So we try to be as transparent as possible. So for example, if you're doing a custom note in Pennsylvania, you'll know exactly who you're investing in terms of CDFIs. Similarly, on impact cash, you'll know exactly the minority deposit institutions or low-income credit unions where your dollars go. So I think that is a real benefit. We believe in transparency, and we think, unfortunately, when you talk about moving a lot of dollars, I'm finding that there's a counter-cyclical, or I'd say a counter program happening where you get less transparency the more money you move, but not in the case of us. We really want to make sure not only that you know where your money is going, but frankly, that you engage these organizations, right? Because like the example of Cindy Dolphin, that partner is called CDC Small Business out of San Diego, and they're a tremendous organization. And so if you're based in San Diego and don't know about them, we want to make sure you know about them. So, really sharing information about these organizations is important to us.
Great. Question from Michelle: what are CNote's sources of revenue? How do you support yourselves?
Yep, absolutely. So I shared that everything we do is on our financial platform. And so we charge a fee for that platform. So for example, if you were going to do a custom note, we would charge anywhere between 20 to 25 bips to host that note on CNote's platform, to do all that goodness we talked about in terms of, finding those specific CDFIs, deploying the dollars, and then reporting. And when I say reporting, I mean both financial reporting, right? So you always have access to your dollars, but also impact reporting. And so all of those things are covered in our platform fee.
Okay, thank you. Can you describe, Virginia asked, can you describe something of your due diligence process? You have a little bit. And have you ever kicked any CDFIs off your platform, or not invested in them any further?
Yeah, so happy to share because it's a really important piece of what we do. So I'll start with, the diligence piece was the first thing we created because it was one of the largest friction points for investing in CDFIs or minority deposit institutions. And so we do a couple things we do. One is we took, I'd say, 40 years of best practices. So CDFIs are not new, and we should have shared that. They have decades and decades of experience through the Great Recession, through other recessions. So when we stepped into this, we had a lot of data in terms of their performance and how they weather the storm. And so because of that, we actually worked with industry partners to create a best-in-class diligence on the performance side, right? So how do we know the real risk available, in terms of a CDFI? What we found in that journey is a lot of the diligence that had been created, I'll say, at the big bank level, not at the investor level. So we added an additional layer of, I'll say, risk mitigation or assessment for you, for the individual investor, so that you could really get a better sense and understand kind of what we're talking about. If we're not talking about a CRA or community reinvestment allocation, we're talking about an individual not wanting to lose their money. And so we added a second layer of kind of risk mitigation and diligence. We look at a variety of factors as we think about it. So obviously we look at both historical performance and future projections, but we also look at things like governance, right? We look at things like diversity of the board. So there's quite a bit we look at and kind of dive deep in terms of who is this organization, and have they weathered the storm? Are they so new that they actually have never been through a recession? Are they so new that they've not been through a natural disaster? I will tell you, and I believe this is still current, that the average age of our CDFIs in our portfolio are 18 years old. So these are not new kids on the block who've never done this before. So again, really kind of tried and true. And of course, making sure that the impact is authentic. One thing that we are very cognizant of is there's plenty of organizations that are going to tell you their impact. They're going to label themselves community, and we want to make sure if that we're taking the time to move your dollars, it truly is going to work for good. And so we do an impact audit as well. We actually have a director of impact evaluation, and that is a piece of our diligence. Is just, is this truly a transformational organization? Is this really actually helping a community thrive? And then lastly, I'll say is we always make sure that we get personal. So really knowing who the team is and having, right, it's not just faceless data. It's just making sure too, we know who's the leadership and who's the team behind that organization. So that kind of gives you an overview of our diligence. And yes, we've absolutely said no to CDFIs. I would say, and I haven't looked at our numbers in a while, but the last time that I was asked that question, we were about at 80%. So 80% of the CDFIs that we diligence, we end up accepting on our platform. Again, keep in mind, we're always monitoring performance. So we have removed people from our platform. I will say that, but I'll also say that we're a big and organization, right? It behooves none of us to see these organizations fail. And so when we say no, or when we give them a pause, there's usually an and here's what we'll need to see, right? And we're a little bit worried about X, and here's what we need to see to put you back on the platform. Or, and, you know, you may be a little bit too young. And so maybe come back in 2 years, right? When you've got a little bit more lending on your belt. And right. So we really try to provide the feedback so that they can ultimately, right, get on platform and get access to new sources of capital. But certainly, you know, at the end of the day, it is about making sure that they go you know, smoothly and really pass our risk criteria for them to be onboarded.
Thank you. So another question from Diane. Diane, you can let me know if I'm properly interpreting the question, but is there any capacity building for those that receive grants? And I think, Diane, you mean the end user of the loan, not necessarily the CDFI. Is that correct? Okay, so that's correct. So.
Absolutely. One of the things I'll tell you, it's very exciting is part of the Wisdom Fund that Danielle spoke of beautifully, is we actually are working with Foundation to grant those women borrowers in particular in terms of technical assistance and building their business. So yes, there's a lot of different ways behind the scenes we work with these organizations, including bringing grants to the CDFIs specifically and bringing grants to the borrowers. So while it's not at the center of our business, obviously, for us, so much of this is field building, right? And making sure that, you know, our mission stays true of really addressing the racial wealth gap in the United States. So yes, and I think the good news is we've seen really an increase in that in this pandemic. We've seen a lot of folks step in and provide more of that assistance during these tough times.
So that's an interesting segue to a question that Nancy asks related to who else is in this business. In other words, who are your competitors, for lack of a better way of framing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say from a platform perspective, not many. So our technology first kind of positioning really is in the spirit of we want everyone to do this. And so how do we make sure that we are reducing the friction and making it as efficient as possible for you to find, invest, and monitor those types of investments? So I'd say on the platform side, not many. I'd say on the product side, so if you're thinking about specific products where to put your cash, there's some great stuff out there. And I think we're very collaborative, and it results to, you know, in this space. It's not just CNote, and we hope you'll look at other options as well. And let me share a few of those. A group that we love, Calvert Impact Capital. So Calvert, I think, is one of the pioneers in this space. They have a great note, a community impact note as well. It is international. So when you think about how do you put your money to work more broadly internationally, there's a lot of goodness in there. They do a lot of interesting work internationally, and some of that piece of that is also working domestically. So I think that's a great opportunity with a little bit of a different flavor. I'd say our friends at CCM, there's a group called CCM that has an interesting bond is another one. And I'm trying to think if there's, I mean, and then of course, individual CDFIs. One exciting thing is we're seeing more and more CDFIs, create their own note. So again, if you're in your, if you have a local CDFI that has that, and they're able to work with individual investors, that could be an exciting opportunity. The unfortunate part we're seeing is can be very challenging for CDFIs, because they're not staffed to work with 1,000 individual investors. And so there's a little bit of tension there. But again, we're always happy to help and be that bridge if that's helpful to make sure that they actually get the money, because we'd hate to see an investor walk away just because, again, there was too much legal or logistics to make it work, which unfortunately has been the case in the past.
So I'm going to ask what might be a final question, because we're getting close to time, at the risk of being, I hope not controversial, but just kind of curious. So let's imagine you had a really progressive women's organization of, folks who wanted to, for example, move collectively, not just in terms of their granting, but in their investing.
Yeah.
And let's say they wanted to come together to create a note through CNote. So a multiplicity of investors instead of like a single person who had to have, $500,000.
Mhm.
With some reasonable minimums, maybe not, like $10 might be a little too little to do the paperwork, but we don't need. I mean, would that be something a CNote might entertain?
It's not only would we entertain it, we've done it before and we love it. It's kind of the best. It's the best of all worlds, right? Because it does allow a group to have this experience together, which I think is really powerful, and see the fruits of it together. And again, our real hope is to eliminate all the friction points around it of, having to go through legal for 9 months or, high costs of trying to create something and securitize it. All that stuff we've taken care of. And so no, that's always such an exciting opportunity when we hear organizations wanting to do that.
Well, perhaps, I don't know, maybe some organization might contact you about that at some point.
We would be delighted.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much. And thanks to all of you who have participated so fully today. I am going to turn it over now to Nirvana Felix, who has done, I just want to say, a fantastic job in coordinating this. Tamara, as many of you know, Tamara Chow has been on family leave, just returning. We're so glad to see you again, Tamara. But in her stead, Nirvana was responsible for pulling all of this together, and she just really did a great job. It's been a pleasure to work with you. So I'll take it away, Nirvana.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And if I haven't had the chance to meet you all just yet, my name is Nirvana Felix, and I'm the Strategy and Impact Associate at WDN. Before I lead us in our closing, I did just want to open up the floor to Kat and Danielle, just to see if there were any closing or final thoughts that you wanted to share with the WDN community.
Danielle, you want to go first?
Sure. I guess I would just say, first of all, thank you. But I would say, stepping into, particularly this is your first community investing opportunity, and stepping into that can seem a bit challenging. And I would just encourage you to be patient with yourself. And use groups like WDN as a resource. I would also offer, however, Kat alluded, we can't offer investment advice, but if there are ways that we can support you in your learning journey as you look to learn more about community investing, please don't hesitate to reach out. This is the education piece is running neck and neck with the borrower stories in terms of one of the most important things that we do here at CNote. And so we would really just be delighted to support you in that journey. So however we can do that, please feel free to reach out.
Beautifully said. I would just say quickly, thank you so much for the opportunity to share our work and this opportunity beyond CNote to move dollars around the issues you care most about. And lastly, the importance of not just intention and action. We're big advocates of when you get comfortable, really kind of holding yourself accountable to taking that first step, whatever that first step may be, and seeing what type of change you can create. Thank you again for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to the CNote team, Kat Berman, Danielle Burns, and also Petra Nelkin for such an incredible presentation. I learned so much. I'm taking away so much from this awesome conversation. So thank you all to CNote. And then my final thoughts are that this is actually part of a larger 4-part impact investing series. And so I hope that you all will consider continuing to learn with us on this journey at session 2, which is taking place on Wednesday, February 2nd from 9 to 10 a.m. Pacific, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern. We will be talking about different types of strategies to shift your publicly traded portfolios so that they more closely align with your personal values. And we'll be doing this in conversation with WDN members and also mother-daughter duo, Linda Mason and Laura Merchant. So I hope to see you all there at session 2 or at the other workshops in this 4-part series. And until then, I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your week and look out for a follow-up email coming your way this Friday. Thanks, everyone.